We'd like to welcome everyone out to this afternoon's Planning and Zoning meeting. We'd like to remind everyone that if you wish to speak to any case on the agenda, you need to fill out a blue card immediately and bring it up to one of the staff members on either side. We're getting ready to vote on the consent agenda, and if we do not have the blue cards here, we will vote, and that will be the end of those particular cases. All of our cases but one are on the consent agenda. Also like to remind you to please turn your phones to off or airplane mode, mute, however you would like to do it. And we would then like you to please watch a small video on how to run things here. So if you could run the video, please.
Welcome to the City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board meeting. We appreciate your interest in the future development of our community and welcome your comments. At this time, we ask you to turn off or select the vibrate option on your cell phones and pagers. Today's agenda includes a consent agenda. These items will be read into the record and acted on in one motion. If you would like to speak on any of these items, please fill out one of the blue cards located in the back of the room and bring it to the front railing. These items will then be removed from the consent agenda and voted on individually. Each case will be heard first by the applicant, then the public, followed by city staff and board members. The Planning and Zoning Board will then make their recommendations to the City Council. The City Council meetings are held twice a month at 5:45 p.m. in the Council chambers. To find out when the City Council will consider your planning and zoning item, please call the Planning Division at 480-644-2385 or log on to the City's website. All planning and zoning meetings are broadcast live and rebroadcast on Mesa Channel 11. To view the programming schedule, log on to www.mesachannel11.com.
Thank you very much. We have two cards here. I want to make sure that we are putting them on the right agenda items. The first one we have is from Bill Bradford, who is wishing to speak to case C2. Is that correct? Okay. And then the other is for case number Z13035, which would be E2. Is that correct? Hearing no objection, I suppose so. All right, Mr. Arnett. So
you said E2?
C2.
C2 and E2?
C2 will be taken off the consent agenda.
Okay. Planning and Zoning Board, public hearing Wednesday, October 16th, consent agenda. First item, C1, case Z13-053 in District 3, 827 West Grove Avenue, located south of Southern Avenue and east of Alma School Road, just under 5.5 acres. Site plan modification. This request will allow the redevelopment of an existing office in the LCBIZ zoning district. Next case is Z13-054, located in District 1, address 1626 North Country Club Drive, located south of McKellips Road on the west side of Country Club. I'm sorry? Oh, that's off. Excuse me, strike that. Moving to item D1, case Z13-050 in District 2, address 3831 and 3841 East Main Street, located east of Val Vista Drive on the south side of Main Street. Just over 1.5 acres, rezone approximately just over a half of an acre from LC to GC, and site plan review. This request will allow the expansion of an existing general commercial use. Next case, Z13-051, located in District 5, address 8900 block of East Upper Canyon Drive, north side, located north of McKellips Road on the west side of Ellsworth Road. Barely over 37 acres, rezoned from RS35 PAD to RS15 PAD, and site plan review. This request will allow a single residence subdivision in Parcel 2 of the Mountain Bridge Master Plan. Case Z13-052, located in District 6, address 6560 South Mountain Road, located north of Pecos on the west side of Mountain Road. Just under 5 acres, rezoned from AG to HI-AF-PAD in site plan review. This request will allow the expansion of an existing industrial facility. Next is item F1, case Mountain Bridge, Parcel 2 in District 5. Address 8900 block of East Upper Canyon Drive, north side, located north of McKellips Road on the west side of Ellsworth Road. Just over 37 acres. This request will allow a single residence subdivision in Parcel 2 of the Mountain Bridge Master Plan. Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Arnett. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Please cast your votes. Voting is unanimous to the aye. Those of you that have cases that have been voted on, you're free to go. You have been approved. Yes, I'm getting there. We missed one item. We need to consider the minutes from the September 17th and September 18th study sessions and regular hearing. Mr. Clement, I believe you're going to abstain from this as you were not present. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. Passes unanimously. All right, thank you, board members. We'll now go to our first case, Z13054, which is C2. And we would first like to have staff give us a short discussion on this thing, and then we'll ask the applicant to please come forward and share his thoughts with us.
Good afternoon, Chair Carter and members of the board. This case involves a parcel, or a number of 4 parcels actually, at the corner of Country Club and McClellan Drive. The applicant is proposing to assemble all 4 parcels into one parcel and redevelop an existing office use and an existing mortuary use. They will be redeveloping the corner lot, which is the one that fronts right on Country Club and McClellan, to provide parking for this new office development. They will be adding on to an existing building, creating a chapel, and turning the existing mortuary building that also included a small chapel operation in it, but that will now become offices and mortuary only. Only the mortuary processes will happen there, and they will add on and have a small chapel. They are developing it very nicely with new landscaping and screened parking, screen walls, and turning it into a much nicer looking corner.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present? Mr. Crandall, come share any words you'd like us to hear on this, and then we'll ask for our public to please come forward.
Very little comments. My name is Frederick Crandall, architect.
Your address, Mr. Crandall?
922 North Gilbert Road. The existing mortuary building is there. The existing medical building is there. There's another building towards the back, which is part of the project. It'll have some minor additions to it. Essentially, I think Ms. Mazzano summed it up very well, that it's a great improvement over what's there now. Essentially, we're adding parking and landscaping to tie the development together. But other than that, there's very little change.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Crandall, board members? All right. We would like to invite Mr. Bill Bradford up to this podium, if you would, please. You wish to speak on this item. If you would give us your name and address, please. And then you have 3 minutes to share your thoughts.
Yeah, my name is Bill Bradford, 507 West Fairway Circle in Mesa, near this proposed program. Roseanne Brooks and I have been looking over the drawings, and we only have a 8.5 by 11 size drawing, and by the time your large drawing is reduced to this, we can't read it. So we think that your program is going to be a lot better than that lot that we have over there, so we're not objecting to it. We're seeking additional clarification for the 59 homes that are in our subdivision, kitty corner across the street from where this facility is going in. We always are concerned about property values, as I'm sure we all are, and the traffic that it might create through our subdivision, because the entrance to our subdivision is just down the street a little ways, circles past Country Club, the golf course, and then comes out onto Country Club. We get a lot of traffic through there unrelated to us, and when we see something going on that might affect that traffic, we get interested in it. And your drawing doesn't show in much detail, and I was hoping we would see some projections and or more drawings. Will they be available after you're through here so we can report back?
Chair Carter, I do have the file with me. I can meet with Mr., I'm sorry, your last name. I can meet with him and show him the full-size drawings.
That would be excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, it references that you're going to expansion of the existing mortuary in the cover letter that we received. Where is that on this drawing? Are you connecting to that building or what?
No, sir, it's the chapel building that's being created now. That's an existing building on the site right now. It's just going to become a chapel, which is part of the function of the mortuary.
Okay, so that building will remain.
Yeah, it will be modified, and there will be a couple of small additions
But your
added.
drawing doesn't show it on here or the pictures. So that's why we asked.
Okay, I can show you a site plan. I believe it's on there. Maybe it's just hard to read.
Okay. And the main and only entrance to your new property, is that off McClelland?
It's the same, that entrance will remain, and then there will be an entrance coming in on the parking lot.
Yeah. Okay. It looked like on the drawing like there was a circled
Yeah.
entrance.
Actually, it'll make that corner look a lot better, because right now it's just a vacant dirt lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I started out by saying
Okay.
anything you put there will be better, within reason, of course, than the dirt lot that we
And then
have.
it'll be nicely landscaped, and there'll be a screen wall that will be the same as the screen wall that's existing right now on McClellan. It will look the same. It'll be consistent.
Mr. Bradford?
Yeah. Okay.
So you're basically in favor of the project, you just would like more information?
We just
on
needed
it.
more information for our people to understand what's going on, because without any information, all kinds of ideas are conjured up, and
I'm sure.
as you can appreciate.
We
And so
appreciate
if I
your-
get together with her, is look at the drawings, and we'll take a report back.
We certainly appreciate you coming forth and taking your time to
Thank you.
address the board. Thank you. All right, do I hear, if there's any discussion needs to take place now? If not, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve Z1354.
Right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you all for coming. We'll now go to our next case, which would be E1 and 2. We'll hear them together as one case. E1 is the minor plan amendment, and E2 is zoning case. Jason, I believe it's in your court.
Thank you, Chairman Carter and board members. The case known as Wayne Plaza that you're reviewing tonight is a threefold request, actually. It's a request for a minor general plan amendment, a rezoning case, as well as an approval of a site plan. The request would establish zoning for the future development of what's anticipated to be a grocery-anchored shopping center at the northwest corner of Signal Butte and Elliott Roads. The property is currently vacant and currently designated business park on the general plan. It has been business park for 25 years. And the request is to go to a community commercial designation, which would allow for the development of a single big box anchored retail center. Staff's been working with the applicant for the last few months. Their initial request was for regional commercial and for a full 60 acres. Through negotiations with staff, the owner has agreed to downsize the center in an effort to work with us to preserve as much employment designated land as possible in the area. And that's primarily because of the existence of some high-powered utilities that exist along Elliott Road and make it suitable for future technology center development. So the second portion of this request, staff is in support of the zoning and the general plan amendment. We've been working with the applicant on the site plan. You'll see quite a few notes within the staff report. The property is located within the Mesa Gateway Strategic Development Plan, which has very specific design and form standards for which all projects should be evaluated. This property is included within that plan. So that said, I'd be happy to answer questions. I believe the applicant is here with a request to do a presentation as well.
Thank you, Jason. Mr. Pugh, would you like to address this project?
Mr. Carter, members of the board, my name is Ralph Pugh. My address is at 1744 South Val Vista Drive, Suite 217 here in Mesa. Thank you for the opportunity to take a few minutes this afternoon. I see that the agenda is not too terribly crowded, so we won't disrupt your whole evening. I'm here on behalf of Wayne of Mesa Limited Partnership, and Mr. Larry Yount, one of its principal partners, is here with me today. We do have some thoughts about this that we'd like to share with you. First of all, we obviously concur with the staff's recommendation as it relates to the general plan amendment and to the commercial zoning on this site. I think land use and that issue, we believe, should be fairly resolved unless any of you have questions. We think it's a good use here. We believe it is the right location for a grocery-anchored shopping center. And in fairness to the whole process, I think the fundamental issue that is occurring here is two things. One, as you all know, and you know better than I do, we have an existing general plan in the city of Mesa in this gateway area. And it is large blocks of land in rectangular and square shapes. Overlaid in conjunction with that is the Mesa Gateway Strategic Plan, which you were all familiar with and saw its evolution and its coming about into the city. That plan was never formally adopted as an amendment to the general plan, but it was adopted by the City Council as a guide to make decisions on land uses in that entire 30-some square mile area of the Gateway projects. So what happens is, in conjunction with that Gateway Strategic Plan, there are all kinds of language about visions, focus, form, design, block lengths, pedestrian-friendly connections. All of these forms relate to the ultimate development of projects within this gateway area. And in fairness to the staff and hopefully to us as the applicant, I think the issue is very simple. We are at a point with our friends on the staff that we need to decide ultimately how many of these guidelines and form and content design criteria should really apply to this particular property. The staff has given us suggestions. They've made recommendations on where to locate buildings. They've been cooperative in that regard. Unfortunately, we can't do those things in a grocery-anchored shopping center. That's in a nutshell what we're talking about today, and that's the issue. Let me take you through just a couple of things here. First of all, when you consider this project, please, as you deliberate your thoughts and have raised questions with me today, if you can, consider where this property is located. You can see the shopping center at the northwest corner of Signal Butte and Elliott. Please look what's around it. Immediately to the east is a Salt River Project facility up on the north. You see that? Absolutely no human beings, no buildings, no pedestrians, no mixed-use development, no high-rise buildings, no nice restaurants. Next to that is a huge parcel owned by the city of Mesa that also will not develop for any human beings to exist that could walk over to this shopping center. Kitty Corner to the southeast is a residential, typical density subdivision, nicely designed, but oriented to the inside along those arterial streets. Adjacent and south of us is the predominantly vacant First Solar facility. Okay? Huge facility. We hope it becomes successful. It is vacant today, pretty much. A few people there probably, but not much going on. So the question then becomes, how do we design a grocery-anchored shopping center in such a way that begins to comply with some of the design criteria of the gateway area? In particular, this is called the mixed-use community district, and yet at the same time recognize where we are and what we are adjacent to. We can't fabricate uses and people and transportation modalities to this site that don't exist and probably won't. And that's what we'd like you to think about today. So that's where we are. Here is a better, a more blown up version of it. In a minute, we're going to talk about the wash and how it affects the design of this site. But please take just a minute, look at that on your screen. Do you see the two red lines crossing through the main tenant A and around through the parking area? That is the wash as it exists today. So one of the major expenses of even bringing this project to the site is to remove that wash and put it to the north behind the project. It will come through the project, but it'll have to be reconfigured. So any reconfiguration of the wash is going to be man-made and will go through the parking lot. We'll come back to that in just a minute. This is what I talked about before. This is the general plan as it exists today, and our land is designated for business park, like Jason indicated, for 25 years. And Mr. Yount and his partners have held on to this land, along with many others, including Mr. Warren Steffi, who's here today, to hopefully someday allow the dream of this area to evolve for the city of Mesa. It's been a quarter of a century, okay? And it's been a long time. How long do these property owners bear that burden of implementing this plan? Honestly, there comes a point somewhere. I don't know where it is. 25 years has got to be getting close. Not for lack of effort either to try to market this site over those years. We've already talked about the difference between the strategic plan and the general plan. Here's what we're talking about. This particular property is located in the far northeast corner of the mixed-use community district. The mixed-use community district contains more than 8.5 square miles of land, 5,400 acres. Please ask yourself this question. Is every project within the mixed-use community district supposed to be designed as a standalone mixed-use project? Every project that comes forward is going to have office, retail, employment, pedestrian-friendly modalities, outdoor restaurants and shopping. Are we kidding ourselves? 5,000 acres? That's not possibly what the strategic plan means. When the strategic plan says mixed-use community, it means, in our opinion and from the language of the plan, that that area is where the widest variety of land uses will be. And taken as a whole, over the 8.5 to 9 square miles, it will be mixed use. It won't just be employment or business park. It will have residential uses. It will have retail. It will have office. It'll have all of it. That's what mixed use means. It doesn't mean that every 30-acre parcel that comes in has to have every element of a mixed use project. And that's the question I raise here. I've raised that question with you, and leave that in your mind. Now, the other thing to keep in your mind for just a minute. Just before the board meeting a month ago, the Economic Development Department put forth a memo declaring, I'll use that word politely, the Elliott Road area as the high-tech corridor of Mesa. We have lots of thoughts about that I won't bore you with today. But here's the fundamental question. When the strategic plan is in place and it's been approved by the City Council, and it calls for the mixed-use area that we saw a minute ago to have the widest variety of uses, including single-family detached housing, how in the world can a department of city staff write a memo and all of a sudden the Elliott Road corridor turns into nothing but employment high-tech uses? That just does not seem right. It's not fair. It doesn't go through the political process. And voila, here we are with a declaration. Pretty much everything along Elliott Road is going to be business now, even though the strategic plan calls for it to be other things and to have the potential for other things. So we only raise that issue for this simple point. Throughout the staff report, there are comments about this small commercial project connecting to future employment to the north and to the west. Mr. Yount owns all that land, and so does Mr. Steffi. They don't know exactly what that's going to be. They're not committed to making that all employment. There's no way that that's going to be all employment, nor should it be forced to be. So to assume that that's going to connect to future employment, it could be a combination of employment and residential. Heaven forbid we use that word, but it's a perfectly allowed use there. And I'll show you why in particular. This is the language that talks about the wide variety of uses. Please look at the very last language. This is under the form content of the mixed use area. This says, as development moves east, exactly where we are, the far east edges of the plan, a transition to less intense development activity, less intense, will be seen through increasingly less intense residential build-out to the planning boundary's eastern edge. I can't read that any more than one way, and that is, as development in the Gateway area proceeds east from predominantly Ellsworth and Elliott, Ellsworth and Ray, where the real focus of urban core development will occur, it will gradually become less intense, it will become more residential in orientation, and therefore necessarily it will become more, I hate to use the word ordinary because we're not building an ordinary shopping center here, but it will become more of what we're used to. The high-intensity mixed-use development will occur further west, in the core areas where it should be expected. So that's what we're talking about here today. Now, here are wonderful collages of examples in the Gateway Strategic Plan of what mixed-use areas should look like. Well, they should look like this. This is a good example. Look at the upper right-hand corner. I'm sure Vince, board member DeBella will remember that. He and his good partner, our late former friend Bob Samish, designed that project. But I would even ask Mr. DeBella today, I mean, I may be stretching my neck out a little bit, if someone came in and said, let's move it, Barnes & Noble and turn it around backwards to Val Vista, let's reorient parking in a different way, and let's put an amenity out in the middle of the parking lot somewhere, how many of those tenants do you think would have signed up to be in that beautiful shopping center? And let me further add, it's a gorgeous facility and well-designed. We have our offices there, but guess what? There's 5 or 6 offices in the second floor of that project, which makes it, quote, mixed use. But it's a very, very small element. That's it. That's all there is. It's not the whole thing. Very nicely designed. Here we go. Let's look at this. Here is the world's favorite comment in any planning. You go to any city in this valley, everyone wants you to be Kierland Commons. Remember when we talked about 5,400 acres in the mixed-use community district? Kierland Commons is 40 acres. 40. Take the hotel next to it, add another 30 to it. Take the golf course next to it. That's a beautiful, wonderfully executed project in the right demographic area. People live there, and they have money, and they spend it there. That's why it works. Let's look at another one. Hold on. This is all in the book. There's Kierland Commons again. Great examples of what mixed use, hopefully at Ray and Ellsworth, not Signal Butte and Elliott, will look like. Here's a great one. Esplanade. 24th and Camelback. Do we get any more prime real estate in the valley than that? Guess what? 1.5 million square feet of office, well-designed, well-integrated, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and a high-rise condominium project. What would you guess is the success of the retail uses on the ground floor? Practically zero. The retail uses in all this pedestrian-friendly, walkable area have consistently failed. Even the top-notch restaurants that are there have left. I don't know why. It could be for a number of reasons. But what it tells you is that we can't simply say something's going to be mixed use and it's going to work. We need to build projects that work in this community and that serve the needs of our citizens and still look nice. So there's an example of what's going on. Well, but back to Mr. DeBella's project, which I love, by the way, because I'm there most of my life these days. Okay. Sorry to do that to you. I'll take a deep breath now, get the heartbeat, blood pressure back to where it belongs, and deal with what we're really here for, and that's the site plan. That's really the only disagreement we have with the staff. It's really not a disagreement, it's just how to get to the end of the day. So, keep in mind the site plan, and let's ask ourselves, we've been asked to provide more foot and bike transit, better building placement with the wash realignment as an amenity. All right, let's click back to the site plan. and take a look at that for a minute and say to ourselves, where do we do that? How can we take the wash area and make it any better than it is today? We were initially asked, one of the things we were asked to do is put some buildings around that wash and use the wash as an amenity to the backside of a restaurant or a patio area of a restaurant or a retail store. Well, we've done that with a building pad right out on Signal Butte that orients onto the wash. We can't put a building in the middle of the parking lot that orients to the wash, because what do you think the chances of the grocer in tenant A leasing that space from us? 0. Because there's no visibility, and they won't rent that space, they won't buy that space. At the end of the day, tenants drive retail businesses and accommodate our needs in shopping. So our thought was, open that wash, orient that building to it. We tried to do something. We made the effort of putting a pedestrian ramada there, and that didn't go over very well as the staff reviewed it. So, I mean, that was a thought to at least begin to have a place for people to assemble. The next comment that we've been asked to do is a better orientation of the building. Now, let's ask ourselves that question. What are we going to do to orient the buildings differently? What advantage do we get in this site plan by moving buildings out to the street, completely to the street, and putting parking around behind them, for example? None. There's no efficiency in that. Tenants don't like that. And the buying public could care less about that. They want a nice-looking center with nice architecture, which, by the way, we're doing. And we've sent a photo collage of the modern, more contemporary styles that we will do and work through design review with. We can't see a single space on there as to where to change the orientation of a building. Mr. Rick Butler is our architect. Many of you may know Rick. Rick's a well-respected commercial architect. He's done wonderful projects, and he's worked with us on this and tried to do some of that. We're at a loss. So if this dialogue we have here today, hopefully if some of you have ideas, we're not expecting you to design our project, but we're at a loss as to what to do with that center and how to make it any more friendly than it is. And we certainly don't think we need to incorporate every design and form qualification that's written into the mixed-use criteria. It just doesn't apply here. All right, I'll go back. Here we are at the last of the questions that are raised and asked of us. More unique pedestrian orientation. Okay? Maybe someday the bus lines will get out there. Maybe. Possibly. How do we design an entire shopping center to accommodate pedestrians from a bus that may or may not even shop there when the bus stops there? And certainly in the foreseeable future, there's no buses there. There's no public transit there. Nobody is walking to this shopping center, even on beautiful days like today. They're going to drive their cars. It is a vehicle-oriented society, and this isn't Ray and Ellsworth. Better building placement. We don't know how to connect the buildings any better than they're already connected. Here's a good one. Floor area ratios. You all know what floor area ratios are. The square footage of the building compared to the acreage of the land. And the higher the floor area ratio, the more intense the building. Hence, we want to get to 7.0, which is high-rise structures. 0.35, our shopping center does not reach that. It's less than 0.35. That means that less than 35% of the site is covered with a building. And frankly, at that area and for that purpose, we think it's a perfectly good floor area ratio. We shouldn't be compelled to make it more intense just because some guideline says that's a range we should be in. It should be developed the way it works. Now, integrate with large user to the west. We do have a connectivity to the west so that if a user comes in there, or if it develops for residential uses like the form of the mixed-use area says it should on this end of the project, connection can be made. Here's a good one. This is my favorite. We're being asked to focus for a minute on having a block length 300 feet. I cannot imagine how the concept of block lengths relates to commercial projects. They're residential. And yet, we're being asked to take a look at that. And the language in the form actually says in residential areas, block length should be 300 feet. So we're totally confused on that one. We agree with the contemporary design. We're full speed ahead with that. We've got new elevations. We're working on that. It will be contemporary, not rural in nature. Here we go with our blocks. In areas where residential and urban centers exist, it is important to provide shorter blocks. That's true. When there is residential development, the block should be shorter. But I don't even know how to define a block within a 32-acre commercial project. Have no clue. Okay, I think we've gone through most of these. I think at the end of the day, current patio location is underutilized. Use the wash more. We want to do a successful project. We want to do something Mesa's proud of. We just do not know at this very minute how to do it in a way that satisfies all of those criteria. One more quick example. DC Ranch. Now, if a mixed-use project is going to be successful, it's going to be successful where Kierland is, not successful at the Esplanade, as good a demographics are there. The Biltmore's right across the street, for heaven's sakes. DC Ranch, a beautiful Safeway-anchored shopping center. Absolutely magnificent. I think Rick Butler probably designed it. It is not working. It has been a disaster with the office uses, all the combination of pedestrian-friendly walkways, and it's the gateway to one of the most wealthy communities in this valley, and it doesn't work. Why will it work here any better? We urge conversation. We're willing to take the time to redesign if there's really meaningful things we can do. And so, Mr. Chairman, we're open to thoughts and ideas. We're not asking you to design it, but if you can say, gee, Mr. Pugh, why don't you move this building here or there, give some thought to that, we will. But we cannot obscure the parking field for the major tenant. Or we might as well do something else on this corner. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's it. You've been very patient. I'll be happy to answer questions or provide responses.
Thank you for your exercise delivery of the case, Mr. Pugh. Board members, Mr. Clement.
Yes, I have a question. Mr. Pugh, referring to this tenant, is there tenant input on this? Is there
yes.
something going on that's not relevant to what we're talking about that's driving this whole process?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Clement, there are discussions going on at a very successful level with not only tenants but with master developer for the commercial center. Absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Mr. Yount's not doing this on speculation. Yep.
Board members, anything else? Mr. Arnett?
I probably would need to yield to the architects on the board, but curious as to if staff has a concern, which I can see, of lack of continuity as you move throughout the rest of the property to the west. Can you not make the building the same as it is in the front all the way around? Has it become too cost prohibitive? Is that so that when you're looking at it from the west, it kind of achieves what they're looking for by putting it in the middle, but it allows a better visual from all of the tenants, people, residential areas, whatever that is going to be that direction. It makes it a little bit more palatable for those folks looking at it from the west. You know, when you drive to these grocery-anchored developments, and just on the other side of the fence is all residential, it's not that appealing. I'm wondering if that's a possibility.
Mr. Chairman, can I try a response, and then maybe the staff has?
Please.
And Board Member Arnett, we certainly agree that the buildings are going to have four-sided architecture, and the buildings that are on the west side of this will have architectural elements and styles that will appeal and be visually pleasing to what happens on the west, although we don't know what that is. I mean, on the one hand, if it were high-tech and it were a huge building there next to each other, maybe no one would care. If it ends up being office buildings and a lot of people there, maybe yes, they would, or if it's residential. But my point is, we understand four-sided architecture and the need for it there. If that's what I don't know if I'm addressing your point, but...
Yeah, I think it is. I'd maybe hear from the architects on the board and their opinion as to what can be done. I would think that something, without knowing what's going to be to the west, something could be done. If you're going to design a very nice-looking contemporary building, then it would seem that you would want to continue that around the complete building facade.
I think, Mr. Arnett, a good point before we hear from the architects on that. The other thing to keep in mind is that Mr. Yount and his partnership and Mr. Steffi own all the acreage around it, 300 or what would it be, Larry and Warren? More than 300, give or take, to the north and west, all the way over to Chrisman. Everything up to the transmission lines to Chrisman, these two gentlemen own. And so integrating all this together is part of what they're thinking about. Yeah.
Mr. DeBella?
To that end, though, I'm curious, like some of the other larger pieces that we've seen come through, there was a general master plan or conceptual plan of how the other uses around it might work. Have you looked at that? Because that might address this idea of connectivity and what that means. How does it fit into the overall global area that would make some sense as to why the center would make sense?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Board Member DeBella, over the 25 years that Mr. Yount and his partners have owned this property, and the 20 years of that I've helped them with it, we have thought many times about master plans and designs. But every time we bring ourselves to think about that, it's hard to do not knowing who's coming in. And to take the time to draw it and design it and figure it all out doesn't mean a thing until we have real people that are really interested. So we know we need to do that, but to design it today and plan it today is very, very difficult. It would just be a dream. It would be a hope. Yeah.
Mr. Pugh, let me ask you a question. At the beginning of the last meeting, when you received the letter from Economic Development, what were in generalities, the thoughts of the economic viability of what they're proposing for that corridor?
Mr. Chairman, our immediate thoughts were impossible to do, unrealistic, unachievable. The fact that there's power there or that there's water there is completely irrelevant. Power can be made available anywhere. Water's available out there. This is too far from the freeway. It doesn't have great access. It's on the edge of the property. And if someone wants to come in and do economic development of an employment type, it's more likely going to happen in the freeway corridor, not out on Signal Butte. So that was our first thought. We had other thoughts, and we kept those to ourselves. The biggest thought was what I said in the beginning. We have no clue how a staff department within the city declares it to be, and all of a sudden, a staff report of ours turns out to be that way. That was frustrating. So we just backed off a minute, took a deep breath, and tried to be polite and courteous here today.
Then let me ask you another question in relation to that. Since there seems to be some discussion about going west, in your estimation, in the number of projects that you certainly have been working on for the last eon or so, the viability of actually having residential next to this seems rather remote in my mind.
Mr. Chairman, at this location?
Yeah, right here in this location.
Oh, you mean at Signal Butte and
right.
Elliott, where
Just
we're
to
talking
the west
about.
of you, because there was some discussion that was given that this area might possibly develop into residential.
Yeah.
That seems unlikely based on economic development's letter that this be more in a employment thing. Where I'm going is, if this isn't going to be residential, then the number of entrances and connectivity that you've got seems to be more than sufficient to create interconnectivity between the two projects. If this becomes a business park and this being retail, seems like they would work together pretty good. And then the business park or whoever comes over here is going to be the one that will need to do the more of the connectivity and relationship to the center as it is shown on this site plan.
Mr. Chairman, that's why on the western edge of the site plan there is connectivity to the west. Mm-hmm. But we as the property owners are not willing to stand here today and say that to the west and north of us will not be residential. Mm-hmm. We believe that is a fully allowed and encouraged use based on the framework plan. I read you the sentence. How could it be more clear? Less intense single-family residential at the eastern edge of the project. So we think there's still opportunities for residential. There's opportunities for office, perhaps, maybe some employment. But we don't make those decisions. The people that make those decisions are the users. You make recommendations. City council makes ultimate decisions. You can color it whatever color you want. Retailers and business users are colorblind to maps that we all create. They go where they're willing to go and risk their money. And we're waiting to hear from them. We'll go from there, Mr. Chairman. I wish I had a better answer.
Well, you gave me my answer.
Yeah,
that's, you know, I don't see, from my own viewpoint here, I don't see anything wrong with the subdivision as you've shown it right here, this site plan. There's some questions I've got in my mind, but they're relatively minor. I mean, you have the main entrance coming in and it goes into a dead end thing and you have to go like you're a mall. That always annoys me on different things, but that's so minor. And then you have, I'm assuming it looks like the new prototype for Quick Trip that's in BP3 that's got the road just right up against the back side of it, which is not very attractive in its current state. But I would hope that that would be mitigated through our design review board. But generally, how you slope the drives and everything seems very adequate. Granted, it would be really cool to have another Carolyn Commons, but in my humble opinion, it isn't the place for it. And yet we've heard from citizens on previous meetings the desperate need to have more commercial out into this area.
Yeah, there is need for commercial, and that's why I think we concur and agree with the staff on the general plan amendment and the zoning. It does need to be limited commercial there. It's a function of how to design it. And again, I take all of your minds back to 5,400 acres. There's not 600 acres of successful mixed use in the whole valley. Not even hundreds. Why are we dreaming that 5,400 will be built that way in every square inch? It's beyond me.
Board members, do we have any other questions for Mr. Pugh?
I do, I guess. This is part of what staff, I guess. Let's assume for a minute that the grocery anchored component is real. Just make that assumption, right? Certain things related to that are almost a given. You've seen them all over the valley. There's reasons why things are done the way they are when it's related to a grocery anchored center. Starting with the parking field, the surrounding uses. So all the pieces and parts of this seem to be compatible with what you would typically associate with that type of center. Call it traditional, call it ordinary. It's not meant to be derogatory. It's just
no. I didn't mean it that way.
They work.
I agree with your word.
They work. So I alluded to it in study session. Are we so rigid in the site plan approval process that during design review and during more development that if something changes, if a pad orientation moves, or a building needs a shift, or whatever the case may be, that would necessitate either additional site plan review or approval? What sort of flexibility do we have as it moves through that some of these things could be addressed at that level?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Mr. DeBello, and I think I may need to use the other mic. I think, as Chairman Carter has mentioned, if this does get approved, there are some details that will need to be worked out in a little bit more. There's some dead-end parking and so forth here that we'd like to see if we can resolve. And so I think we could handle those kind of minor adjustments through the DR site plan review process or the DR process instead of bringing it back to this board if you would choose to go that route.
Mr. Chairman, let me confirm, too, we're not here to say that we absolutely have to have a vote on this today. We are willing to work with the staff. We're just groping for direction. That's it.
And then one last thing. So let's think ahead here for a minute and say this moves forward and it gets built, wherever the case may be. Is there a concern on staff's part that this sets the plate, if you will, for the rest of the development, that because of that there's no recourse as to maybe pulling in some of the other elements that might be appropriate at different locations related to the strategic plan of the Gateway area?
Chairman Carter, Board Member DeBella, I think we had a discussion with the applicant a couple months ago about being careful to not always consider every parcel for development as the exception to the plan. Well, this one's on the edge, it doesn't matter. This one's next to this, so it doesn't matter. I think where we've gotten to at this point is I think the applicant has worked with us to downsize the request, and staff is subsequently in favor of the rezoning and the general plan amendment. We do not feel that the site plan has gotten to where it needs to be to even come close to at least mimicking some of the forms, some of the things I handed out to the staff, things that are in the plan. We weren't looking for the intensity of Kierland, and certainly those set, giant, grandiose examples, but we were looking at something a bit more unique and special that's intended for the area, and we're just not there. This is a very typical grocery-anchored center, completely vehicular-oriented. We just wanted some more time to work through the details. So,
are there any comments from board members?
So what are those? Specifically, what would be those recommendations that
Can you
would
distill it into a nice little quantifiable statement?
A quantifiable statement. Chairman Carter. And
because let me finish. Because I agree that we just don't want status quo, especially as this is the gateway into that area. Another gateway, not but another.
Okay.
I agree.
Certainly, we do anticipate that the user to the west would be employment. It's designated business park. It's intended to grow 100,000 jobs in the area. And now it's a big plan. I get it. But this should also be a destination for those users. So we do feel on the western edge of the plan we could do more to create an interesting environment. Kaylee, if you don't mind, could you put up the example I had at Fairfax Corner? This is just a random example of a low-intensity use. If we can cut over to the Elmo, that would be great. I'm not sure. All right, it's relatively low intensity. Most everything is single story. There's a large anchor, which is actually a theater, not a grocer. I get that the grocer needs the visibility. We're just looking for some more elements of pedestrian-friendly spines in there where people can go have something to eat or go shopping. If we could accomplish that while giving the retailers their visibility that they need from the arterials, that's wonderful. We also think that the wash itself needs to be incorporated as a better amenity than it is. It does look like basically a ditch or a drainage channel running through the parking lot. And I think it's been underutilized. We could do more with it if we wanted to. The architect seemed quite ambitious when we met with them twice, yet unfortunately the resubmittal was nearly identical to the first one that we received 4 months ago. So.
And there's not significant cost they have to reroute it, so they reroute it. There's not significant cost to make it a little more presentable, attractive, whatever, right?
The drainage, it's already being moved, so it's not its natural alignment, so they can do as they wish with it within reason.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Arnett, if I could, it's not making it presentable. We're 100% agreeable to that. It will be landscaped and open and visible and presentable. The issue is we're being asked to put a building on it and to back it up to the wash in the middle of the parking lot. The only reason that wash is there is because we're moving it. It's not like it's in its natural location. It's a beautiful riparian area. It's a dry wash. And we'll make it beautiful, but it's not the focal point of this shopping center. Anyway, we'll make it look nice. We just can't put a restaurant backing up to it with patio seating around a dry wash in a parking lot.
If nobody has, I'm just got a few things. This is bugging me. I'm looking at this, and we're trying to do a nice development. But what do we have directly south? An ugly, gigantically huge albatross called First Solar that is horrendously awful. It was at the beginning. I'm ashamed that I voted for it, but it's there. Over to the east, you got this beautiful city of Mesa area where you're right. There's no human being that will ever set foot into that area. And just to the north of that, you have SRP substation and stuff. And again, nobody is going to come from that area. You have an LDS church just to the north, and where are all these people coming from that you're talking about? I don't have a problem with this site plan as it exists. Could it be as you put it, munched a little bit? Yes, but in generalities, I think that Vince's idea of having this go through maybe design review might be the best thing. Mr. Pugh, are all the pads going to be platted as individual pieces of property?
Mr. Chairman, and members of the board, the platting of each individual pad site is a function of the owner's disposition and the tenant's desires. As tenants and users for the pad sites kind of materialize, some prefer their own land and they want to carve it out. Others are fine with a long-term lease, and the owner has to kind of play that out as those users come forward. So it would probably be a combination of both, like most shopping centers are.
Okay, but right now, is this to be a platted?
Well, it will be platted because typically the major anchor grocer wants their own site.
Well, I'm thinking that if we're going to be platting this, each one of those entities, let's say like BP3, would be coming back. It's got to go through design review separately. It's got to go through all of those kinds of things separately, does it not?
It does, Mr. Chairman, but I think in fairness to the staff's interest in having a differently designed site plan, I don't believe Design Review Board has the discretion to significantly alter that. And I think so I don't want to kid any of us here today that would happen there. The site plan occurs here.
Are your tenants pretty well underway? And the reason I ask that is how much deviation from our site plan is there going to be once they either purchase their land or go ahead with the development?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the main tenant is well on the way. The master developer is in place. We are working with the junior tenants and the pad sites. So it is a real deal. The question is, it all comes together after the major tenant's in place, and we're certainly flexible. We are willing to do something to this site plan. We don't know what to do that will satisfy the issues that our staff colleagues have. Just a fair, honest difference of opinion.
So Randy made a good point, and you've said it again. I'm still not totally clear. Between now and design review, if some modifications are made to the site plan, assuming we get approval here, how stuck are we with this? Is it? I mean, that's it, or is there some flexibility that can be conveyed?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Mr. DiBella. As far as anything that would be done, just on a staff level and the design review board, it would be pretty much the site plan. We'd be talking about little slight modifications, again, dealing with some of the specific site issues, but not talking about any rearrangement of buildings or so forth. Anything like that would become a more formal, either site plan modification that staff would handle as an official application or coming back to this board for action.
What is that point where it moves from your administrative approval to the other?
There are some specific requirements for site plan modifications in terms of percent change in floor area and total floor area, some things about height and drive aisles. Mostly it's as we look at individual cases and look back what the discussion was, what the important issues were, are we affecting any of those things? And so we have some flexibility there on what we determine. Again, the things that you've brought up, Mr. Carter, are all things I think we could deal with through the staff and DR level for, again, just working out some of those little details of the site.
I guess my mayor, before I turn time, it was Mr. Pugh on the viability of these, your BP 1 through 7 actually being in those configurations.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, which configuration?
Your all of your pad sites that you've got around here actually being in that configuration with that building type. And I think that's not where you're at yet.
Just one.
So while he's doing that, Mr. Chairman, if you use those as examples, we often see slight modifications to those. They get into the details. The parking lot changes a little bit when they start doing their engineering work. They get a specific user. That footprint's not exactly the same. Those are all routine things we handle for as we move through the process and would not require any type of coming back to a board or anything.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if let's assume for a moment that site plan in front of you was approved. As tenants come forward and pad users come forward, from time to time it changes. Mm-hmm. And for example, let's say a pad user comes by that's larger than we'd expected and wants to take 2 pad sites. We would have to come back here to this board for approval of that. Those kind of things would have to be done. And so we understand that. The simple things we don't understand today that I think are holding this thing up, and we would like to, I mean, if we could go forward with a vote today, that's great. But the unresolved issue that the staff will still have as we go forward to council is insisting that we make this more visible somehow to surrounding properties, make it more pedestrian friendly, and do something with the wash. The answer to those questions is we cannot do anything to the wash other than what we're doing, or this project won't work. So we're at pretty much a standstill there.
When you don't have, you've declared there are no pedestrians.
Well,
you know what
people will walk through this shopping center, but if we were all to sit out there the rest of our lives, how many people are going to walk to it from their home? Not many. We do need to accommodate the pedestrians, of course, but it doesn't have to be the focus of the center. So we just don't know how to solve those couple of issues, and without more clear direction on that, it's going to permeate and continue to City Council, and a discussion is going to happen there. And we'd like to solve it if we can. We just don't know the answer to that issue. What does it mean to be more pedestrian friendly? Really? I don't know.
So, Mr. Pugh, what's staff's opinion? What are they telling you? Are they just telling you to create an interpretation?
Listen, Mr. Chairman and Board Member Clement, in fairness to the staff, they have given us ideas and given us concrete suggestions. Unfortunately, those so far don't work. If we could do some of the things they're saying, we would. But I'm thinking again, just for the moment, of Dana Park. Beautiful. Not every tenant on Val Vista backs up to Val Vista. The only tenants and pad users that back up to Val Vista and have parking interior are those at the main drive aisles. The other tenants, guess what? They're off so they have parking in front, like most tenants want. Those are things we just have to accommodate, or we might as well look at another use here. Really, that's what we're thinking.
So what I really hear you saying is the tenant that you have in tow pretty much is establishing the parking plate, and
yes.
And with that, it doesn't give you much flexibility. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman and Board Member Clement, a classic example of what you just said. I can't remember. It was 15 years ago, probably. There was a big push to take gas stations and orient them backwards. And there were a few of them that we did in Mesa. Drive by them today. Think of Dobson and, how far south is it? Baseline? There was one there on the northeast corner. They don't work very well. It was a great idea. Some planner had the idea, hey, back the C-store up to the corner, put the pumps behind and the parking behind. That's cool. It'll look great. People don't use it. We have to be realistic and still do nice design. That's all we're looking for here. And if we knew how to solve those couple of issues the staff has, we would do it. We're not obstreperous in that regard. We're happy to do it. We just can't do those two things.
All right. Okay. I think let's hold on our thing. And Mr. Steffi, you have a blue card here saying that you support the case. Would you like to speak, please? Would you please state your name and address, Mr. Steffi?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Board, it's an honor to appear before you today. My name's Warren Steffi. My address is at 6750 East Main Street, Mesa, and I'm here to speak about I really support what Ralph Pugh has been talking about and Mr. Young in their development here. I support that commercial development there, not knowing what the development's going to be around this area. And with the commercial building across the street raising a lot of questions, I expect that will be occupied by something in terms of some type of manufacturing or development, which will have quite an influence upon this area. If we knew what that was, it would be easier for me to speak in my behalf of my property. My concern is I'm just concerned as my property just to the north of the grocery store is that we have sufficient buffering as far as trees and an area that will prevent a lot of foot traffic or whatever it might be that might be filtering there. As close as I am to the grocery store, I am concerned about noise and early morning deliveries and this sort of thing should my property ultimately be residential. And if you could answer that question for me, I could be a little more specific. But I guess I am going to rely upon Mr. Yount and Ralph Pugh to do sufficient bufferings as far as adult or pretty good sized trees when they this project's approved. And I would like to be sure that the traffic around the store and these buildings here, that doesn't become a heavily trafficked area. It doesn't appear that it would be, but I would not feel good if it did become a heavy trafficked area there. And it looks like their design is pretty well to take care of that. So I don't have a lot of complaints to make, only that I would like to be considered as far as a sufficient buffering between my property and theirs. And that's my principal concern. I appreciate taking time to express myself, and I want to say that I have a good working relationship with Mr. Yount and Ralph Pugh, and I'm sure that they'll do their best to make this a very fine development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Steffi. Vince?
One more thing. I think I know the answer to this, but if this was continued, it just seems to me that we'd be at the same place 60 days later. Other than maybe the benefit of going through some more iterations, there seems like there might be an impasse in terms of what the developer and what the planning needs to occur versus, the needs of the development. So, am I incorrect in that, or?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member DeBella, the thought just struck me that you're absolutely right. We would probably be in the same spot. However, the good news is, if you're inclined to make a recommendation for approval of the land uses and the site plan, since this is a zoning case contemporaneous with a site plan, the site plan ultimately gets approved by City Council. So in this instance, as a board, you're not the last vote on it. If this were already zoned, then people typically come to you and you're the last vote. So if you gave us that recommendation, that still gives us time. If there are any other tweaks, and we'll commit to meet with the staff and try it one more time and see if there's something that can be done, because we still, at the end of the day, have to deal with the City Council and what their thoughts on this are. So when we're willing to move forward and do that. Thank you.
Any other discussion, board members? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr.
Wesley?
Just a couple of things, real quick. One, one conception or maybe misconception out there that doesn't directly affect the site plan, but I felt like I needed to respond to, and that's in terms of the residential and the gateway plan and what it says about residential. The whole plan needs to be read, and the goals of the plan in terms of that flight corridor that kind of is north of Elliott. That is the intent there. The discussion about the residential really applies to south of Elliott. We really don't intend much residential, if any. Maybe it could happen someday in context of some employment that happens, but we really don't anticipate residential north of Elliott. And so we do understand this will be an auto-oriented development in terms of people are going to come there by car. Our interest has always been, once they get there, what's the experience and how can that be approved? But the main thing I wanted to mention is that in terms of your staff report and the stipulations that are in there, we've realized as we've sat here, we have two standard stipulations that deal with navigation easement and noise attenuation because of the location here that we forgot to put on here. And so if you do a motion for approval with the site plan, if you could say including the two standard stipulations, then we can actually add those on when it goes on to council.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wesley. Board members, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve GP Minor 1305.
Is that with the site plan?
Just the plan. We need them in separate motions.
That's right. You're for the general minor plan amendment. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. The minor plan amendment passes unanimously. Now, is there another motion for the zoning case and site plan?
I will attempt this. Last time I made a motion, it was unpopular. I'm going to try again. But I'm going to add, so I'm going to make a motion to approve KZ 13-035 with the additional two stipulations that were just referenced by Mr. Wesley, with another stipulation when it goes that it goes to design review, that there's a note to them that they pay particular attention, that there's a concern of this board of the concern of staff and connectivity, and also the fluid movement, and also the design, the 360 design of a contemporary nature. So just to add that to them so that they can address those concerns.
Right. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
All right. Please cast your votes. Motion passes unanimously. Right. Is there any other business? He was very exercised. My goodness. Haven't seen you that riled in a long time.
Yeah, I've seen him in a ball game.
If there's no other business, let's adjourn till next month.
Be me.